Let me show you two people, same $80,000 take-home income, and starting from zero. Person A saves 10%. He puts it in an actively managed fund at 0.64% fees. He follows the 25 times rule and retire when he hits his number. Timeline: 43 to 51 years. Person B saves 35%. He puts it in Fidelity ZERO Total Market Index Fund at 0% fees. He also knows his real target is not 25 times. It is closer to 28 times for a long retirement. But because he is spending less, that number is smaller anyway. Timeline: roughly 25 years. And here's the thing. Person B does not need to be extreme, dropping from 10% to even 25% savings. And moving from an active fund to Fidelity ZERO Total Market Index Fund, that alone shaves somewhere between 15 and 20 years. Off the timeline. Most retirement calculators assume you'll work until 65, but they don't show you the leverage point, the savings rate. In this video, I'm going to show you the exact table that Fidelity doesn't want you to see, because once you understand it, you won't be able to unsee it, and might retire years earlier than you ever thought possible. Here's the number. The average American is saving 4.6% of their income. According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, that's where we were in 2024. And at a 4.6% savings rate, you know how long it takes to retire. Over 50 years. That's not early retirement. That's dying at your desk. Now here's the other thing most people do with that 4.6%. They put it in an actively managed fund that charges them fees every single year, while also, statistically, losing to the market. We're going to talk about the actual math behind early retirement, why the rule everyone follows has a massive blind spot built into it, and why Fidelity quietly handed investors one of the best tools in personal finance history. For free. So, the 25 times rule. Save 25 times your annual spending, and you can retire. It comes from the 4% safe withdrawal rate, which itself comes from research by financial planner William Bengen in 1994. He looked at every 30-year retirement window going back to 1926 and found that withdrawing 4% of your portfolio each year, adjusted for inflation, never ran out of money. 25 times your expenses, 4% per year. Solid math. But here is what nobody tells you. The 4% rule was specifically tested against a 30-year retirement. If you retire at 62 and live to 92, you are fine. But if you retire at 45? Now you are looking at a 45 to 50-year window, and the math changes completely. The poor Swiss ran an updated analysis of the original Trinity Study. They're finding at a 50-year retirement horizon, the 4% rule has only a 90% success rate, and that is with a heavy stock allocation. If you want real safety for a long retirement, researchers now point to a withdrawal rate closer to 3.3 to 3.5%. That does not sound like a big deal until you do the math. At 3.5%, you do not need 25 times your expenses. You need 28.5 times. At 3.3%, you need 30 times. Equals 1.5 million, based on $50,000 per year in spending. For someone spending $50,000 a year, that is a gap of up to $250,000 that the 25 times rule quietly ignores. And that is before we even talk about sequence of returns risk, which is maybe the most underrated retirement threat that nobody explains properly. In 2018, Fidelity launched 4 index funds with a 0% expense ratio, not 0.03% or 0.05%, literally zero. And as of early 2026, those expense ratios are still confirmed at 0. Now, here is why this matters more than most people realize. Let us put that in real money. $100,000 invested, 8% gross market return, 30 years, at 0% fees. That is Fidelity. Zero Total Market Index Fund. You end up with approximately $1,006,000. At 0.64%, the average active fund, you end up with roughly $861,000. At 1.1%, what the average active fund advertises, you are looking at around $782,000. That is a gap of over $200,000 compared to even a moderate active fund. Gone. Not to the market, not to taxes, just to fees. And here is the part that should make you furious. That money does not buy you better performance. According to S&P Dow Jones Indices, 2024 SPIVA Scorecard, the gold standard report on active versus passive investing, 65% of actively managed large-cap U.S. equity funds underperformed the S&P 500 in 2024. That is actually worse than the 64% average underperformance rate over the previous 24 years of tracking. Here is where everything clicks together. Because the fee conversation only matters if you are actually building a portfolio worth talking about. And that depends entirely on your savings rate. This research comes from an analysis the FIRE community calls the shockingly simple math behind early retirement, built on a 5% real after inflation return and the 4% withdrawal rule. Here is the actual table. Going from 10% yearly income saving to a 50% saving does not cut your timeline in half. It cuts 34 years off it. That is not linear. That is an acceleration curve. And it comes from a mechanic most people miss. When you spend less, two things happen at the same time. First, you invest more, so your portfolio grows faster. Second, your target nest egg gets smaller, because your annual expenses are lower. The 25 times rule is taught like it is a law of physics, but it was a 30-year assumption written in 1994 for people who plan to retire in their 60s. If you are watching this, you probably have a different plan. The math is not complicated. Once you actually see it, save more than the average American's 4.6%, stop paying for fund managers who, by S&P's own data, fail to beat the market 65% of the time. Know your real number. Not just 25 times, but 28 to 30 times if you are retiring early. And let compound growth do the rest in a fund that charges you nothing to hold it. The 10 years you are trying to get back? They are already in the math. You just have to use it. If that sounds like your kind of math, hit subscribe and let's get smarter about our money.